Welcome to Playing Above the Line, where we interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and community activists to get their thoughts and perspectives on leadership. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Aviso Group, a business consulting and accounting firm focused on preparing clients for the future through innovation and positive growth. Welcome to Playing Above the Line. I'm Alan, your host, and producer Carrie. Let me tell you something. It's good to be back. We took a little hiatus because of some COVID scheduling and whatnot, but we are back in the studio, and it's good to be here. And we've got a good one for you today. Our guest is Mark Berte, and he is currently the executive director of the Alabama Coastal Foundation, and we're excited about what Mark is going to be talking with us about. So, Mark, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you. And this studio, the Fairhope Library studio, is fantastic. I love what y'all have done to it.
Yeah, I'll give props to Carrie. This is our first official podcast from our new little studio in the Fairhope office, and so she spent some time getting this place arranged, and she did a great job. So I think she's missed her calling. She should be a podcast studio designer. Anyway, Mark, tell us about the Alabama Coastal Foundation. Let's start there and what you guys do and maybe your journey on how you got to where you are now. So.
Absolutely. So yeah, the Alabama Coastal Foundation, it was actually founded 28 plus years ago. George Crozier, longtime Sea Lab director, Tom Hutchings, as well as Phil Pinesley got together. Basically, they wanted to have a nonprofit organization, a local one, to focus on improving and protecting Alabama's coastal environment. We've been around for 28 years. I've been serving as the executive director for the last 10 plus years. 2009, we moved across the bay, right over the Sanger Theater ticket box office is where the worldwide headquarters of ACF is, and has been there since my predecessor helped move that across, Bethany Craft. As a matter of fact, when I applied for the job 10 years ago, I was like, should I even put my hat in the ring? Because I don't have a science background. And she's like, no, Mark, they're looking for somebody just like you. I have some nonprofit management side of things. And so I did not realize they were actually looking for somebody just like me in terms of helping to fundraise and strategic plan and all the things that, come about. And good news is I hire good people who have the science background, and they're on my board of directors, advisory council, so I could ask questions. And if I don't know the answer when I'm out in public, I usually say, hold on, I'll find out, and then get back to people. So, but our mission currently is to improve and protect our coastal environment, and we added through cooperation, education, and participation.
Okay, great. Well, you got a lot going on, so let's just back up a little bit. You mentioned that you had some prior not-for-profit experience. So what is your background, and how did you end up running a environmental type not-for-profit?
An environmental not-for-profit, yes. It's actually one of those things that I did not say when I was 5 years old, hey, I want to do that. But I had memories of coming down to the beach.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Matter of fact, I still remember sitting, on the back steps of Gulf Shore's rental house with my family's up from Birmingham and looking at a thunderstorm over the Gulf of Mexico, seeing a lightning strike, and my dad explaining, okay, you can count right now. And then that's, how you know when the thunder claps. So I do have beautiful, wonderful memories of being here, growing up on the Gulf Coast on the summer times. So yes, I guess my path of getting to being in the nonprofit world started as a volunteer when I was a teenager, Camp Sumatanga up in north part of the state. United Methodist Church Camp, and probably one of my biggest mentors, Nina Reeves, who had been up there for 48 years. She saw that I picked up trash on the ground one summer camp as a middle school student, and she's like, Mark, I want you to run for the trash representative for Mid-High number 1. I was like, okay, what's that? And it's basically a church council that meets, and they basically plan the programs for the summer camp. And so I got elected to that. Nobody else wanted to run, I'm sure. But then, through that, you got to be senior high volunteer on different committees there, Methodist Love committees here.
Yeah, that's right.
And then really did as a young adult, and even more so, volunteered a lot of my time there and in other programs as well. So when I became college and then grad school, I really did try to focus a lot of my studies on nonprofit management. So.
And I'm assuming, you mentioned Nina Reeves, which obviously was a big influence, but I'm assuming that you probably saw a lot of that from your mom and dad. I mean, I know that specifically your dad was the longtime president of Birmingham Southern College in Birmingham, and both my wife's siblings, both of them and their spouses, went to Birmingham Southern, and they were there during your dad's time, and they absolutely loved him. And so I've heard great things about him just through them, but I know that he's a great man. So talk about the influence maybe that he and your mom had on you, and how that developed your love for volunteer work and service.
Absolutely. It's funny because I think most independent college presidents is, it's about 2.5 years is their normal tenure, and he was there for 29. So he's still very much involved in the community. pretty much every day, my two older sisters and my younger brother and I would hear that we were loved and to be a leader and a helper. We would take those summer trips, not only down the Gulf of Mexico, but elsewhere to kind of learn his job. He did have the summers off. And so every place that we went to, there would be some sort of educational value to it. And we learned that much is required of people who have a lot, they have to give back. And so that was ingrained in us day in and day out. So whenever it was an opportunity to serve, we were encouraged to do that.
That's great. Well, so talk about leadership then. This is a leadership/entrepreneurship podcast. And so maybe talk about what you learned about leadership from watching your dad or maybe even Nina, or just what your style and your ideas that you've developed over the years as far as your leadership style and what you think is important.
Right. One of the questions you had asked beforehand is like, which skills have you mastered and which ones are you still working on? I've said none of them and all of them, answering those respectively. Yeah. So I think definitely leadership is a process, and you're not ever at your mastery, in my opinion. So I think trying to be a good listener. Nina Reeves literally said this. We were part of the team, and keep your antenna up, which means, looking out if there's a person sitting by themselves or if something's happening that you need to go ahead and intervene, and not only just listen for the verbal cues, but also listening with your eyes and being open to making sure to address anything that you see out there. So
that's great advice from Nina. And speaking of keeping your antenna up, I mean, one of the things that caused all of us to keep our antenna up was the pandemic. So let's talk about that for a minute. Number one, how did that affect your organization? How did you guys kind of navigate the uncertainty there? Because I've got to think, as a not-for-profit, you rely, I would think, a lot on public funding and people's generosity and whatnot. And so I've got to think that maybe during the time people were maybe pulling back on their extra spending or whatever. I don't know. But how did that kind of play out with you guys, and how did you navigate those uncertain times?
That was a big challenge, obviously, for us and everybody, I would say. And I handed y'all our annual report from last year, which we put up on our website, joinacf.org. You try to make everything as transparent as possible. But one of the things that Alabama Coastal Foundation has done in the last 2 strategic plans that we've developed, there is a book out there called Forces for Good. It's based off of the Jim Collins book written in 2005, Good to Great, what separates a good leader from a great leader in the business side. And so Forces for Good was literally done for the nonprofit sector. And it was re-upped, and 5 years later, I think in 2012. And so we embedded all of those 6 principles for high-impact nonprofits, and one of which is master the art of adaptation. Okay. So when COVID started coming, we realized, okay, we're about to do our sea turtle training. We're about to bring 400 people into the Meyer Civic Center, which we've done every year since that program's been under our hat. And we said, this is not a good thing to do. Let's try to rework this. And so our new Share the Beach director, Sarah Johnson, who did not have a videography degree or anything, we were able to put together the entire program that we were able to normally do in a video format that was entertaining, that people said afterwards, I loved to have this because then I can go back and, really understand what the training session was and to go back and watch it. And we had hundreds of people watch that video, some of whom weren't in Gulf Shores, Baldwin County, some of whom were elsewhere that couldn't get down there for that training. So really trying to be open to those, knowing that you still have to have that training session to have those volunteers. Right. But to adapt for that, ACF has been very blessed to be able to grow as much as we have over the last 10 years, but we've always been a distributed management environment. So we had people in both of our coastal counties working, many of whom work from their home office. Right. And so when we had to do that, stay-at-home orders were issued, we were still able to get things done, making sure we take care of our, our family first, and then addressing whatever needed to get done. But the finances, it was really hard that year. Yeah. And thank goodness the PPP loans came out, and we had our local bank, the first, who helped us through all of that process, and PPP2 as well. So relying on, one of our board members came up with the phrase inclusive environmental stewardship. That was 10 years ago. And basically that means, we work with individuals. We don't, other nonprofit organizations, the governmental sector, whether that's local, state, or federal, the private sector, small business, big industry. We don't care what political affiliation you are. We're going to work with you. And so I think that's one of the things, trying to be as collaborative as we can in terms of our leadership as well as, how we operate.
Well, that's good, because I think sometimes when people hear environmental not-for-profit, there's a stereotype out there, right? Maybe where you don't get warm and fuzzies when you think about that. But it sounds like inclusive environmental stewardship, that's a great way to basically say, look, we're going to take all comers, right? I mean, anybody that can come and has our same ideals and whatnot. I mean, we're not going to exclude anybody because of any kind of belief or whatever, right?
Absolutely, 100%. And one of our things, we literally have the word cooperation in our mission statement. So if we're not cooperating, we're not doing what we said to the IRS that we should be doing. We don't sue. We partner with groups who do that. We actually partner with groups who get sued. So we say meet people wherever, or meet businesses wherever they are. If they're willing to help to improve, we're going to work with you to make that happen.
Yeah, that's great. Well, expand a little bit more on the forces for good. You said one of the 6 principles was mastering the art of adaptation. So what are some other things that you guys have adopted from that book?
And again, it's on our website, our 5-year strategic plan, which is based off of that cooperation, education, and participation. Cooperation is where you get the awareness. Education, we have K through 12 plus adult education. We've got this summer our wetland compliance workshops. If you're a real estate agent or a lawyer that need those CEUs or developer planner, you can sign up through our website for those classes. We do those both in Mobile County and in Baldwin County. Again, mastering the art of adaptation, we had to change those into a hybrid online and in person. We're doing it just in person this time around. So, education is where we get that understanding, but then the participation is where we shine. Great to learn and to know, but if you don't actually do something about it, roll up your sleeves and plant trees or plant sea oats, which is the cover of our 2021 annual report, because back in 2016, we planted sea oats that were 8 inches out of the East End beach. Now they're 8-foot sand dunes, and that was a partnership with the town. And so, yes, the other principles for Forces for Good are to advocate and serve, and that's really important because as a 501c3 organization, people think, oh, you can't do anything about policy. It's like, no, that is actually, if you're not doing something about policy, if you're not trying to improve, then your job as an organization is harder.
Yeah.
You have to do it in a nonpartisan fashion, but it's still important to be able to have that principle. Make markets work is the second principle, which just means work with private sector. You're in a nonprofit sector. There is a governmental sector, but if you're not working with the private sector that are doing good things, then you're not using your full abilities there. Inspire evangelists, which means that people, we always say that 90% of the work gets done because of our volunteers. Our staff give great experiences so that they'll have volunteers who'll say, yeah, be aware, volunteer for their education programs, for example. And if they had a good experience, they're going to tell somebody else. So it's a nice positive cycle. Nurture nonprofit networks. We support a lot of different initiatives. The Coastal Alabama Livable Communities Coalition, which provides bicycle safety training free of charge for all police officers here in Coastal Alabama. They have to have CEUs as well, so they can go to our website and sign up for a free training session there, which has been approved by the state. We have the coalition, the Green Coast Council, which helps to run the Sustainability Summit every year. There's just a lot of partners. The South Alabama Coalition of Nonprofits that we help to support as well. So there are a lot of different networks out there. We try to work. Master the art of adaptation, number 5, and then share leadership is the final principle 6. And that is, I always encourage when I speak to college classes, hey, volunteer your time, intern. That's what I did. Yep. You get to learn what you like and what you don't like as well. But then the nonprofit organization gets to watch how you operate. And the more you're able to do that, then like I've hired our last intern that was our summer intern, who was then our fall intern. She's now our coastal relations coordinator, and she will be our full-time coordinator starting in May after she graduates. Okay. We try to develop those leaders, watch for those future connections, make sure that you give them as much support and direction as they would need, and then let them do the work. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. Even today, those 6 principles are still very much important to have.
Yeah, no doubt. That's great. So you mentioned your team. So what do you look for when you're looking for somebody to come join your organization either as a volunteer or a full-time employee? What are some qualities that you guys look for?
10 years ago when I started, there were 0 policies written at ACF. When I found that out after I was hired, I was like, we should probably change that because IRS, they require you to do some of this stuff, the 990, which y'all have helped us do so many different times. So yes, our personnel policies, we literally embedded the qualities of honesty, making sure you have a positive attitude, but being upfront. If you have an issue, being able to talk about it and have that conversation. So every single one of our job announcements list that as the soft skills are put in there directly for that reason, to kind of screen out people who might not be there. And then we ask for a resume, a cover letter, because you need to be able to see if they can write or not write, as well as 3 references up front. We make all those 3 reference calls because, you make sure that you're doing your due diligence internally. But once you do that, you have people who you can work with, and then making sure that they have what they need, again, the supports.
That's great. So you've got a lot going on. And I do know, just from other people that I know personally who work in not-for-profits, it can become an kind of all-encompassing passion, right? Which is great. But at the same time, it might start to kind of creep into your personal life and whatnot, and you might have trouble kind of flipping that switch. So talk about work-life balance. How have you found that for yourself? I mean, is it something that's tough to walk away from? Do you have some tips and pointers you can give us to help folks who may have problems turn that switch off?
Absolutely. And that is something I struggle with, because obviously with the technology that we have, you can be 24/7. And I do respond to emails and those types of things. But when I'm at different events and thinking about, like, I play tennis, I talk to people about ACF. So that's technically work. But if you do what you enjoy, it's not really work, which is one of the best parts about the nonprofit sector, is you don't get as big of a paycheck, but you definitely get those benefits. Yeah. And fortunately, the pandemic itself made everybody stop, made everybody take some time and take some stock. I definitely could tell before the pandemic, my work-life balance was probably a little bit more of the work side than I needed to be. But to try to take that as a growth moment to say, you know what, it's okay to not have X, Y, and Z done all the time. It's, okay to make, that's one of my things is, it's okay to make a mistake every now and then. You don't have to be on point every single time. And I think that's one of the things. My perfectionist personality is probably the biggest thing to do. But again, trying to make sure that if you're at the point, you don't want the organization to make a mistake. So just making sure that you're, always staying in front of things, if you will.
Yeah, great. Well, you mentioned the strategic plan, 5-year strategic plan for the Alabama Coastal Foundation a couple of times. So what is your vision for the organization 3, 4, 5 years down the road? How do you want to see it grow? What do you see for yourself and the organization going forward?
The 5-year strategic plan ends in 2022. So this summer and fall, the board will get together and develop that for the next 5 years. So we follow their lead. The board is the one that sets the policy and the direction, and the staff is the one who are able to execute that. So we will find out. Stay tuned, and that you will find that out. But I hope that it does continue. We've got a lot of good programs here. Again, the Mastering the Art of Adaptation is also looking at what programs to cut. So, being really mindful about that in terms of the resources that are out there. But yeah, we're TBD, if you will, on that.
So I think you mentioned tennis. So when you're not executive directing, what are some things that you like to do to kind of blow off steam and relax a little bit? Tennis
definitely was probably my favorite pastime. But I would say I shoot pool, which is also a fun thing. And it's a little bit of similar, in terms of how the balls move around and everything like that. I'm relaxed. I watch TV and all the streaming stuff with my wife, walking in the neighborhood. It's just... The beach is actually, I love the beach. Many times, though, for the summertime, my wife has a lake house, and her family does. And so we go up to the lake house to really, truly unplug, which is nice. Then you can completely veg.
You mentioned that you lived in Seattle, I guess, when your wife was in grad school. So do you travel much at all?
We love traveling, and that's one of the things that our daughters, we give a family trip every Christmas. So we've been very fortunate to be able to do that. The one that got canceled because of the pandemic, the Grand Canyon trip, that was the hardest one because we had everything set up, and then we couldn't do it the next year because they weren't letting people in. And then the registration system, once we finally got that, we were able to do that last summer. So,
So is there anything going on right now, current activities, programs, whatnot, that you're excited about that people can get involved in?
Absolutely. We have our live video feed of the osprey nest that's there over at Wolf Bay. Again, a collaboration not only of ACF, but the City of Orange Beach and the Nature Conservancy. There's a live stream of an osprey building a nest. And we actually, if you're a third grade teacher, we've written lesson plans. So you can actually do that with your students free of charge on our website. Our Coastal Kids Quiz, which is for fifth grade, talking about the pandemic earlier, we had to redo that. That was an in-person thing. We had to cancel that twice, and we were like, we're not going to ever do this again. So we're doing that as an online thing. And as a matter of fact, last round, which was on coastal insects, just wrapped up. it had a 76% increase of students participate of all of last year, which was an increase when we did it in person too. So it's drawing more students. So if you're a fifth grade teacher, public or private, anywhere in the state of Alabama, you can sign up for our final round this school year. That's going to be on sea turtle, so it'll be a really fun thing to learn. You can actually get $100 for your classroom if you have 80% of your students participate. And then finally, our Good Life bicycle ride. We try to get more people out into the environment to enjoy it, either walking, biking, kayaking, the more they want to protect it. So we do a Good Life bicycle ride at the Gulf State Park every year. It's always that Saturday of Mother's Day weekend. You can sign up through our website for that as well.
It's a lot of good stuff. It's great.
But in terms of I know one of the things that we are focusing on is our Share the Beach license plate. Okay. And if people want a beautifully designed by one of our volunteers license plate, they can go to joinacf.org and make their commitment. It basically raises funds for that program, but we have to have 1,000 done by July. And as a matter of fact, if you're an entrepreneur and know how to, we're trying to write a grant to pay for those license plates. So all we need are people to sign up. So if you're an entrepreneur and know how to do that, we've written a grant to be able to get that. But that's the ongoing, once you get those license plate, that's ongoing support for that program. So if you're any of your listeners out there or that, they can just go to our website and shoot us an email as well.
Well, you mentioned the website a couple of times. We'll link all that information in the show notes. But if people want to get involved, if they want to give monetarily, if they want to give their time, I'm sure they can find all that information on joinacf.org. So, Mark, thanks. This has been great. Enjoyed it.
This has been fun. I appreciate y'all giving the opportunity. This has been great.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. It definitely helps us in the ratings, and it also makes it easier for other folks to find the podcast. And as always, a big thank you to producer and editor Carrie Wolf. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Avizo Group. If you want to know more about who we are and what we do, you can visit our website at avizogroup.com. That's AVIZO group.com. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.